Welcome to the Podkey summary of watchOS Group Lab from WWDC 2026. A lot of the watchOS news this time comes down to one theme. The Apple Watch is getting more useful without pretending it's suddenly a tiny phone. The big shifts are around smarter widgets, better health data, easier ways to ship glanceable experiences, and a developer toolkit that finally feels more watch-aware. There are also a few reality checks baked in, especially around AI, networking, and first launch performance, which is probably healthy for everyone involved. Apple's design guidance is still very clear about what belongs on the wrist. Watch experiences should be glanceable, concise, and relevant to the moment, because people are usually checking in for a few seconds, not settling in for a long session. That sounds obvious, but it matters more now that the platform can do more. The watch is personal and always with you, but attention on the wrist is brief, so apps need to keep interactions short, content easy to adjust, and the whole thing grounded in what the person needs right now. One of the more interesting additions is the foundation models framework on watchOS. But this is not on-device AI running locally on the watch. It requires a network call, and it also doesn't just lean on the paired iPhone's model. So developers have to treat connectivity and latency as real product constraints, not edge cases. Supported providers include Claude and Gemini through PCC, and developers can also plug in any service that conforms to the language model protocol. That does come with the practical stuff, entitlements, quotas, and keeping an eye on token usage, so an ambitious feature doesn't turn into a billing surprise. Apple is also giving developers fallback APIs to check model availability and token usage before making the call, which is exactly the kind of plumbing this needs. On a watch, graceful degradation matters a lot. If somebody's offline, or they're on a non-cellular model with no connection, the app needs a sensible backup instead of a spinning wheel of disappointment. A very useful change is that developers can now get Widgets and Live Activities onto the watch without building a dedicated watch app. If they already have the iPhone side in place, they can surface those experiences through SmartStack and even Control Center with much less overhead. That means time-bound updates, like a delivery, a ride, or some other in-progress task, can automatically show up on the watch where they're easy to glance at. And for controls, the watch can pick up handy shortcuts in Control Center without a giant separate project attached to it, which feels like the right amount of effort for the result. The other half of that story is relevance. Apple is pushing developers to use relevance APIs, so widgets appear because they're actually useful in a particular context, whether that's time, location, or some other user state. That's partly about good experience design, and partly about battery life, because the system is not handing out unlimited updates. There is a widget update budget, roughly every 15 to 20 minutes for active watch face widgets, while SmartStack widgets are updated more based on engagement than on a fixed timer. So the idea is pretty simple. Be smart about when you ask to be seen, and the system is more likely to help you out. On the health side, there are new workout zone APIs that let developers show heart rate zones, cycling power zones, and even custom zone metrics. That works both in real time during a workout and afterward for post-workout insight, which gives fitness apps more room to be specific instead of generic. There's also a new menopause API for tracking perimenopause symptoms, which continues Apple's broader push to make the health platform more comprehensive and more useful for things that have often been underserved in consumer tech. The liquid glass visual style is also getting refined in watchOS 27. The changes sound subtle, but on a small display they matter. Darker edges, clearer separation between content layers, and better performance overall. The whole goal is better legibility without losing the look. There isn't a watch-specific opacity slider for users to tweak, though. Customization still mainly comes through system accessibility settings like reduced transparency, and developers need to work within that. For developers, Xcode 27 adds direct watch-to-Mac debugging, which skips the iPhone and uses a peer-to-peer connection. That should cut latency and make the whole process more reliable, which is the sort of improvement that saves a lot of low-grade frustration. There is one catch. The network has to allow device-to-device communication, so some corporate environments may block it. And on newer watches, the 5 Hz Wi-Fi chip helps move data faster, so this should feel meaningfully snappier in practice. Apple is also being pretty realistic about first-launch asset fetching. Because the watch's radio scheduler limits background downloads, developers are better off bundling the essential assets up front and pushing non-critical downloads until after launch. If more content has to come later, stage loading and background URL sessions can help smooth things out. In plain language, show something useful first. Use placeholders when you need to. And don't assume the watch has the bandwidth or connectivity to make a perfect first impression on demand. That offline first launch case is not rare on a watch, so planning for it is part of the product, not just an engineering detail. A couple of platform changes point to where Apple wants watch apps to go next. SceneKit is deprecated in watchOS 26, and Apple is steering developers toward SwiftUI Canvas for 3D and drawing work. The pitch is better performance, a more modern graphics pipeline, and easier reuse inside SwiftUI's declarative model, which lines up with the rest of the platform. watchOS 27 also introduces the rewardable API, which lets users drag and drop to reorder items directly on the watch. That's a first for the platform, and Apple had already used it internally for Control Center. So developers can now build more customizable interactive collections right on the wrist, which is a small change that could make watch interfaces feel a lot less rigid. Taken together, this all feels like watchOS growing up in a very watch-like way. More capable, more contextual, a little more flexible, and still constantly reminding developers that the wrist has limits for a reason. Honestly, that's probably why the best of this update sounds useful instead of exhausting. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.